All right, let's take a look at your 9.1 worksheet on the distance and midpoint formulas. Just to remind you of each of those formulas because they'll be important use on these first two problems. Distance formula can be actually written 4 different ways. Hopefully we did it this way, but it's basically the difference between the x values quantity squared plus the difference between the y values quantity squared. Add those together, take the square root. For the midpoint formula, your midpoint is simply equal to the the average of the x values. Excuse me there for a second, hiccuped a little bit. So we add your x coordinates together, divide by 2. Add the y coordinates, divide by 2. Remember that midpoint is a point. So for each of these first 3 problems, we're just going to be using this formula throughout, or both these formulas. So it says find the length and the midpoint of each set of points. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So my distance is going to equal, subtract the x's, so 8 minus 2 quantity squared plus 13 minus 5 quantity squared. So as I continue to do that, I get 6 squared plus 8 squared, 6 squared, 36, 8 squared, 64. Add those together, I get the square root of 100. Square root of 100 is 10. For my distance formula, for my midpoint, I'm just going to add the 2 x's together, divide by 2 for the x coordinate, add the y's together, divide by 2. So 2 plus 8 is 10, 10 divided by 2 is 5, 5 plus 13 is 18, 18 divided by 2 is 9. So I get the midpoint 5, 9. All right, do the same thing for number 2. First thing I want to do is find my distance formula. So my distance is equal to the square root. I do x2 minus x1, so negative 4 minus 0 quantity squared plus negative 1 minus 7 quantity squared. So my distance here is going to equal the square root of negative 4 squared plus negative 8 squared. So as I continue to do this one, I get the square root of, 16, or negative 4 squared is 16, sorry about that. Negative 8 squared is 64. So my distance is equal to the square root of 80. Now I can actually simplify 80, which is 16 times 5. Square root of 16 is 4. So my distance actually is 4 square roots of 5. For my midpoint formula, again, I'm just adding my x's together. So in this case, 0 plus negative 4 divided by 2, and add my y's together. 7 plus negative 1 divided by 2. So do the arithmetic. 0 plus negative 4 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 7 plus negative 1 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I get the point negative 2, 3. All right, number 3. Let's take a look at the distance formula first here. Distance is equal to, let's see, negative 2 minus a minus 4 squared plus negative 4 minus a minus, just minus 6 quantity squared. My distance here is equal to 2 squared plus negative 10 squared. So my distance equals 4 plus 100. 4 plus 100 is 104. Oops, helps if I write 104 instead of 100. So now, square root of 104 doesn't simplify, but 4 goes in there 26 times. Square root of 4 is 2, so I get 2 square roots of 26. For the midpoint, add the x's together. So negative 4 plus negative 2 over 2. Add the y's together, 6 plus negative 4 over 2. So I get negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. 2 divided by 2 is 1. My midpoint is negative 3, 1. Alright, that takes care of our first 3 problems. Alright, on number 4 is going to apply some of these formulas to a circle. So, first of all it says negative 8, 10. So negative 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8. Of course, it's a little bit off the grid. It should be up about right here. Okay? And the point negative 4, 4, right here, are the endpoints or points of the diameter of a circle. So I'm going to connect those. Note that when we change these notes, they'll fit a little bit nicer. So first of all, it asks you to find the center of the circle. Well, that's just going to be our midpoint. So I'm just going to add the x's together. So negative 8 plus negative 4 divided by 2, and then 10 plus 4 divided by 2. So I get negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. So our midpoint is actually at negative 6, 7. So there's our midpoint right there. So my line wasn't quite perfectly straight. Now it asks you to find the radius of the circle. Well, if this point is at 6, negative 7, I'm going to use that point and this point, negative 4, 4, and find the distance between those two particular points. So, do my distance here. My distance is going to equal the square root. I do the x's first. So if I go 6 minus a minus 4, so 6 minus a minus 4 quantity squared, plus, then I can go 7 minus 4 quantity squared. So again, subtract your x's, subtract your y's. So now I get the square root of, or I should say, sorry, not the square root of, 10 quantity squared plus 3 squared. Well, 10 squared is 100, 3 squared is 9, so that equals the square root of 109. That, oh, I made a mistake earlier and I just caught it right now. This point is not at 6, 7, but it's at negative 6, 7. That's going to make that negative 6. That's going to change that to a 2. That's going to change that to a 4. So this should be the square root of 13. All of a sudden I saw a square root of 109. That's over 10. This should be much smaller. Glad we caught that here, but that distance should be the square root of 13. See how just a negative sign can throw you off just a little bit. So that's all we had to do with number 4. Flip to the back side. It says the distance between the points 2, 7 and 5y is 5 units. Find the possible values of y. So this is where you plug the values into the distance formula, but here we know the distance. So the distance is 5. So we can say 5 squared, whoops, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We can say at least 5. We can say 5 is equal to the square root, subtract the x's, 5 minus 2 quantity squared, plus y minus 7 quantity squared. You'll probably see how I got ahead of myself there a little bit. To get rid of the square root, we square both sides. So now I can say 25 is equal to, well, if I go 5 minus 2, that's 3. 3 squared is 9. Plus this y minus 7 quantity squared. Now it's just like problems we were doing in the last unit. Subtract 9. So 16 is equal to y minus 7 quantity squared. To undo a square, we square root. Don't forget plus or minus. Some of you forgot that on your last test. So I have plus or minus 4 is equal to y minus 7. I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So y will either equal 11 or 3. And just do a quick, I could do a quick check if I wanted to, just by plugging those back in and checking in the distance formula. Like right here, I know that this is 9. 11 minus 7 is 4. 4 squared is 16. 9 and 16 make 25. Sure, it works. Same thing with 3. 3 minus 7 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. It does check out. All right. Number 6 says the midpoint between the 2 points x, y, and 213 is negative 4, 11. So the midpoint is negative 4, 11. Find x and y. So if the midpoint equals the coordinates 4, 11, how do we go ahead and find midpoint? Well, we add the x coordinates. So in this case, it's going to be x over 2 divided by 2, and the y coordinate is y plus 13 over 2. So what we do is set each of these equations equal to their respective coordinate and solve for the variable. Meaning, I want to set those two equal and those two equal. So I know that x plus 2 over 2 must equal negative 4. So if I multiply both sides by 2, x plus 2 must equal negative 8. Subtract 2. I know x is negative 10. I take y plus 3 divided by 2, set it equal to 11. Multiply both sides by 2. So y plus 3 now equals 22. Subtract 3. And y equals 19. And I have both x and y. All right. On the bottom of the page is just some more practice factoring. You can never do enough of this. So on the first one, factors of 32 that add up to 18 is 2 and 16. Factors of 50 that add up to negative 15, negative 5, negative 10. On the next one, since we have a leading coefficient of 5, you're going to multiply the 5 and the negative 4 to get negative 20. So then you're going to think of two factors of negative 20 that add to 8, which are 10 and negative 2. So now you can write this as 5x squared plus 10x minus 2x minus 4. And you can now factor it by grouping. So if I group the first two together, I can factor out a 5 and an x. I'm left with x plus 2. The last two terms have a minus 2 in common. Notice how I get x plus 2. Combine the outsides, 5x minus 2 sets of x plus 2. Of course, I can always FOIL to check. All right, next one, factors of 66 that add up to negative 19. Wow. Let's see here. Ooh, this one, I don't know if it does factor nicely. Let's see here. We could have 1 and 66, 2 and 33, 3 and 22, which I normally would say would be it, but the 66 is positive. So I think this one is actually a typo. So just to make this problem work a little bit better, hopefully I caught it for you when doing it, change that to a minus 66. Because then it would factor to x minus 22, x plus 3. I think that's what it was actually meant to be. All right, on number 5, difference of perfect squares. So you just take the square roots and add and subtract them. Whoops. That one should be a subtract 13. On number 6, ask what they have in common. They have a 5 and an x. So you're just left with x plus 4 and you're done. On the next one, so we're looking at factors of 14 that add to negative 9. So you go minus 7 and minus 2. So we go 7x squared minus 7x minus 2x plus 2. So now we can factor by grouping. First two terms have a 7 and an x in common. So I'm left with x minus 1. Then, the next term has a minus 2 in common, x minus 1. Notice how I'll change that positive 2 to minus 1. So I have 7x minus 2 sets of x minus 1s. On the last one, it's a difference of perfect squares. We have 2x and 2x plus 5 minus 5. Whoops, helps if I write 5. All right, that's it for your 9.1 worksheet.